Have you ever wondered how the monstrosities that you face in the bayou were created? Maybe you were curious about their stories? Or even perhaps you were bored to go into the game and read all those pages of the Book of Monsters. Well, it doesn't matter, cause I got you covered. I would like to welcome you to my first video about the Book of Monsters. What we're gonna do in this series is basically read all the information the book has for each monster in the game and each boss. If you want to discuss more about the monsters and the bosses, you can catch me live on Twitch 5 days a week, and you can find the link to my Twitch channel in the description down below. Now, the first monster I chose is the Immolator. In my opinion, he has one of the most interesting backstories. They say he was a holy man, driven to madness. Shall we find out more? Researcher's insight into the Immolator. Undated.
The Immolator seems to be the most tormented of them all. The smallest movement sends him into a rage, attacking chaotically. And when shot, he burns even hotter and charges like an angry bull. He is, of course, extinguished in water and can be fatally consumed by his own internal flames, but otherwise represents the most intelligent example I have seen. The beast can actually open doors. I have noticed certain biblical parallels in the story that, I believe, describes the very first occurrence. Did the religious factions have it right after all? I wonder. We both assumed that the folklore was just that. Lore. Scary bedtime stories. Another author's futile attempt to force linear, comprehensible human meaning onto an inexplicable event. But what if this time they got it right? The beatings that led to Jeremy's transformation must have taken place in a volatile location, but it is unlikely that any of the perpetrators were aware of that. One witness survived and is listed as having been admitted to the asylum, diagnosed with religious mania and terrified of hellfires. I found both Clemens's journal and part of the serial referenced and added both to the archives. It's quite a violent tale.
Journal of Father Vincent Clemens. Undated. Original burned. Transcribed 1 out of 3. Today, the responsibilities of my post weigh heavily upon me. I must bear these burdens before God for my congregation, and long have I done it gladly. It is great honor to lift the burden of sin from the shoulders of my constituents and bear that weight to God. But the words spoken to me through the confessional's web partition this very morning, they've not left me, though their content I would absolve before God of my own accord. May that I bestowed peace upon the confessor, for I found no peace myself. Though wrong it may be to record of this confession, brought to me in good faith and confidence, I hope that in writing this account, I may exorcise its memory from my own mind and relieve the burden of its memory. I shall write these words, then let the heart's fire consume them. Be done with them. It is very dark night. The night is full of inhuman barks and chirps, though I know them to be the cries of the gray fox that haunts the chicken coop. I cannot help but shiver at every childlike cry. Journal of Father Vincent Clemens, undated, original burned, transcribed, 2 out of 3. I stole, even now, unwilling to commit the boy's tale to paper. When he first spoke, I supposed him a liar. Now, the darkness of my chamber, as his words continue to echo within me, I'm no longer so sure. Enough. Must begin.
It was a strange thing,
He told me.
and I weren't sure it were real, even as it were happening. You see, Father, my first sin is what work I've taken on. I stole, lied, and stole.
The boy's language was atrocious, and my transcription does it no justice. No wonder he had fallen in with thieves. But it was God's will, perhaps. Had he been well spoken, he would just have been but a well spoken thief. I stifled a yawn, as a man of God must, and patiently bid him continue. I hear confessions of his nature dozens of times a week. Thievery, adultery, lies. Men are so predictably monotonous in their expression of weakness. Already, I felt boredom begin to encroach upon my mind.
Well, that preacher, yeah? One what found tied up, bloodied, outside his church last week? You seen it in the papers?
Boredom fled. He paused, but I urged him on. I knew the preacher of whom he spoke, Reverend Jeremy Byrne, and though I cannot say I like the man, an attack on a man of God cannot go unpunished.
Well, I weren't there for that, but that was just the first act of the play, you might say. I was there for the second. I knew it were wrong, Father, but I do what I'm paid for. And last night, I was paid for coming along to take that preacher out to the bayou.
Take him out to the bayou. Though I may misremember many of the boy's words, I am certain he uttered those. A euphemism even I know is shorthand for murder.
Journal of Father Vincent Clemens. Undated. Original burned. Transcribed. 3 out of 3.
At this point in the story, I must make my own confession. I had not heard such a tale in months. Though I knew many murders were committed in my own parish weekly, perhaps even daily, most murderers were not the sort to hold counsel before God. I found myself taken with a most unholy curiosity. Suddenly, I could feel my blood pumping through my veins, as if in a frenzy. It had been some time since I had been to purchase one of the adventure stories sold for a dime at the local general, and I found myself thinking of one of the most recent I had read as I sat there listening, clutching my rosary beads as if my grip could force the story more quickly from the boy's pale white throat. I asked the boy then, quite plainly, if he had murdered the man. He was silent for some time. I grew impatient and demanded he speak.
I couldn't say, Father. I couldn't rightly say.
His tone was thoughtful and bore no remorse. Rogue. Oh, devil.
The men I was with, they beat Reverend Jeremy fiercely. I hung back on watch, but I was more watching Mr. Jeremy, Father. And just when I thought he couldn't take no more, he started screaming. Scripture it were, I think, though he sounded like the devil himself.
I was on the edge of my seat, barely daring to breathe lest I distract the boy from the course of his story. His breath had quickened. Memory clearly disturbed him. I must know more.
He kept right on screaming, and then there was a light like fire, and he began to burn. Didn't see anyone light a match, he just...
And that is when that idiot of an altar boy came screaming into the church, having just received the morning paper, saying that Reverend Byrne was missing and 2 found dead out in the bayou. And had I seen the news? The boy fled. Though I caught sight of his back as he sped through the church doors, I doubt I will ever see him again.
Reverend Jeremiah and the Black Hand. Date published January 1896. Author Jasper Priest. Dime novel. Pulp paper. 3 out of 4. He wasn't much to look at in his plain black suit, but he was a man of God, and anyone could see it. His faith shone through in his optimistic step, his kindly smile, and his polite manner. Yet, he had a harsh word to say about the local Black Hand gang and their activities in the city of New Orleans. When he spoke of Charles Matranga, the congregation could feel the heat of his brimstone upon them. Reverend Jeremiah's harsh words soon reached the ears of the mayor, who had promised to take action against the Black Hand. The men of the Black Hand were fearsome and violent men, their bellies set on drink and their minds set on gold. The first threat came by letter, but Jeremiah had no family to hold hostage. The vile threats did not shake him, for he believed that God would protect him. He had the Black Hand's letter published in the newspaper, accompanied by another righteous sermon condemning the criminals and calling for their immediate arrest. So, men were sent to his home in the night, where they dosed the Reverend with chloroform to keep him quiet, removed his little finger, and clove his tongue in two. Jeremiah would not be silenced, and when his tongue was healed, he could not be stopped from taking the pulpit once again. "They have tried to make a devil of me," he hissed at his congregation from across the pages of his Bible. "But only God can make a devil, and God has not yet sent me from his light." Don't miss the next issue, The Last Stand of Reverend Jeremiah. In this issue, Reverend Jeremiah, the great preacher turned detective and the star of our favorite adventure series, takes on organized crime in the great city of New Orleans. The Last Stand of Reverend Jeremiah. Date published January 1896. Author Jasper Priest. Dime novel. Pulp paper. 4 out of 4. The second threat came delivered by hand. 6 hands of 3 thugs who dragged Reverend Jeremiah from his bed out to the bayou in the dead of night. They wanted him to stop preaching against the family and against Black Hand. He would never stop preaching, he said, though his split tongue slurred the words. They laughed at him and pushed him to his knees. "Reverend, you have a lot more to lose than your tongue. But our boss isn't a godless man, and if you promise to stop your slander of his business, to stop your preaching altogether, he won't call us out again." Jeremiah looked off in the distance, as if reading from a page. "But if I say I will not mention his word, or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it. Indeed, I cannot." He was rewarded for this speech with a blow to the head that sent him first into the muck. But the Reverend did not despair. He could feel the frenzy of his faith burning within him like a fire. "Whenever I speak, I cry out, and I proclaim violence and destruction." The Reverend was shouting now, and the thugs took several steps back. A most unholy light, it seemed, had begun to emanate from his face. The thugs looked at each other nervously, uncertain what to do. "Let him that stopped me be destroyed like the city of old that the Lord overthrew without mercy." With those words, Jeremiah howled in fury, and as his rage consumed him, he burst into flames, consumed by heavenly fire, though no match had been struck. He ran at the biggest of the men, setting his clothes alight and sinking his teeth into the grisly flesh of his neck as he tore at skin and muscle and fat with his teeth. The screams could be heard for miles. It truly was a miracle. So, that was everything the Book of Monsters has about the Immolator. I really hope you found it interesting. If you did, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe to my channel, and maybe even click on the notification button. All the support is greatly appreciated. See you on the next one.